17-year-old Amara Wilson clutches her boarding pass as security forcefully drags her off flight 2187. First-class passengers film while Amara desperately explains she did nothing wrong. White flight attendant Veronica Klein screams about, "These people never following rules." Grandmother Eleanor's face shifts from shock to calculated calm. Amara doesn't know her grandmother just called the CEO of Global Air. "Cancel every single one of our orders. That's $8 billion. Yes now. How could a simple pair of headphones ignite a firestorm that would transform an entire industry?" Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and accountability, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of extraordinary courage against discrimination. Amara Wilson had been counting down the days to her first international flight. Not just any trip, but a prestigious summer fashion internship in Paris that only accepted 12 students worldwide. She stood in her bedroom, carefully placing folded designer clothes into her suitcase, items she had saved babysitting money for years to afford. The acceptance letter sat prominently on her desk, still bringing tears to her eyes whenever she glanced at it. Fashion wasn't just her passion, it was her escape from a world that constantly reminded her she didn't belong in spaces of privilege. "Knock, knock," came a gentle voice at the door. Eleanor Wilson, Amara's grandmother, stood with a wrapped gift box in hand. At 67, Eleanor carried herself with the posture of someone who had broken barriers her entire life. As the founder and CEO of Wilson Industries, she had transformed a small aircraft parts supplier into one of the most respected aerospace companies in America, all while facing discrimination as one of the few black female executives in the industry. "I got you something for your journey," Eleanor said, handing over the elegantly wrapped package. Amara carefully opened it, revealing a pair of top-of-the-line noise-canceling headphones. "For when you need to shut out the world and focus on your designs," Eleanor explained. Amara hugged her grandmother tightly. Ever since her parents died in a car accident when she was 8, Eleanor had raised her with unwavering love and support. "I wouldn't be going to Paris without you," Amara whispered. "Nonsense. You earned this on your own merit," Eleanor replied firmly. "But I want you to remember something. No matter how things seem, never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve to be exactly where you are." Those words would prove prophetic the very next morning at Phoenix International Airport. Despite their first-class tickets and elite status, security pulled Amara aside for random additional screening while white travelers breezed through. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened in a way Amara recognized from board meetings where opponents underestimated her grandmother. At the gate, further indignities awaited. The agent examined Amara's boarding pass with suspicious scrutiny. "Are you sure you're in first class?" she asked, despite the clearly printed assignment. When Eleanor presented her identical ticket, the agent waved her through without question. "It happens every time," Eleanor murmured as they waited in the party, first-class lounge. "That's why I insisted on traveling with you. Things have improved since I started flying in the 70s, but not nearly enough." Boarding began, and Amara watched as white passengers in first class were greeted warmly by the flight attendant, a thin woman with artificially bright blonde hair whose name tag read, Veronica. When Amara approached, Veronica's smile vanished. She examined Amara's boarding pass with the same suspicion as the gate agent. "You're in 2A?" Veronica asked, her tone suggesting Amara had stolen the seat. "Yes, by the window," Amara replied politely, despite her rising frustration. She noticed Veronica hadn't questioned the elderly white man who boarded just before her with his first-class ticket. As they settled into their plush seats, Amara observed Veronica's behavior more closely. When white passengers stowed oversized bags or kept phones on during safety instructions, Veronica offered gentle, smiling reminders. Yet when a black businessman across the aisle had his bag slightly protruding, Veronica sharply instructed him to follow proper storage procedures or check the bag. Eleanor noticed too. She reached over and squeezed Amara's hand. "Document everything," she whispered. "Our experiences only become real to others when we have proof." Little did Amara know, the true conflict was about to begin, one that would escalate far beyond anything she could have imagined, challenging not just her dream journey, but revealing deep-seated discrimination that an entire industry had kept hidden for decades. As Flight 2187 reached cruising altitude, the tension in first class continued to simmer. Veronica moved through the cabin offering pre-flight beverages, her demeanor drastically shifting between passengers. White travelers received warm smiles and attentive service. "More ice, Mr. Patterson? Can I get you a refill, Mrs. Davenport?" While Amara and the few other people of color received curt, minimal interaction. Amara tried to focus on her fashion portfolio, making final adjustments to designs she hoped would impress her Parisian mentors. The persistent knot in her stomach tightened with each passing slight. Eleanor had dozed off, the exhaustion from her recent executive meetings finally catching up to her. When turbulence hit, the seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ding. Amara noticed several white passengers continuing to move freely around the cabin without comment from the flight crew. Seeking some peace from the growing anxiety, she pulled out the noise-canceling headphones her grandmother had gifted her, hoping to lose herself in music for the remainder of the flight. The music had barely started when she felt a harsh tap on her shoulder. Veronica loomed over her, face contorted with exaggerated anger. "I just announced all electronic devices need to be turned off due to unexpected turbulence. Take those off immediately." Veronica snapped loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Confused, Amara removed her headphones. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear any announcement about electronics." She looked around, noting at least 4 white passengers still using tablets, phones, and headphones without interruption. "Don't lie to me," Veronica hissed. "I made the announcement clearly. Everyone else managed to hear it." An older white woman across the aisle spoke up. "Actually, I didn't hear any electronics announcement either, just the seatbelt sign." Veronica ignored her completely, focusing her wrath solely on Amara. "This is a safety violation. I need those headphones. Now." "They're mine," Amara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'll turn them off, but I'm keeping them with me." What happened next shocked everyone in the cabin. Veronica reached down and slapped the headphones from Amara's hands, sending them clattering down the aisle. "How dare you talk back to me?" Veronica shouted. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes certain people unwelcome in first class." The cabin fell silent. Amara felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. Instead, she quietly pulled out her phone and began recording. "Please don't touch me or my belongings again," she said calmly. "I'd like to speak to the captain about how I'm being treated." Veronica's eyes widened at the sight of the recording phone. "That's it! Security threat!" She rushed to the cabin phone. Within minutes, 2 air marshals appeared at Amara's row. "Miss, we need you to come with us," one stated firmly. Eleanor had awakened during the commotion, her eyes sharp and alert. "On what grounds are you removing my granddaughter? She's done absolutely nothing wrong." "We've received reports of disruptive behavior and failure to comply with crew instructions," the marshal replied robotically. Around them, multiple passengers had begun recording. A white businessman stood up. "This is ridiculous. The flight attendant assaulted her, not the other way around. I'm a witness." His objections fell on deaf ears. The marshals firmly grabbed Amara's arms, forcing her from her seat as Veronica watched with a satisfied smirk. Amara maintained her dignity, even as they marched her toward the exit, aware of the numerous phones capturing the injustice unfolding. As they reached the door, she looked back to her grandmother, expecting to see distress. Instead, Eleanor Wilson's expression had transformed to one Amara recognized from news footage of her grandmother facing down hostile corporate boardrooms. It was the face of someone calculating not how to avoid a battle, but how to decisively win a war. Eleanor pulled out her phone and dialed a number from memory. Her voice carried clearly through the now silent cabin. "James, this is Eleanor Wilson. Cancel every single one of our orders with Global Air. Yes, all $8 billion worth, effective immediately." Viewers, have you ever witnessed discrimination like this on a flight? Comment number 1 if you believe Veronica's behavior was clearly racially motivated. Comment number 2 if you've personally experienced mistreatment from airline staff based on your appearance. And if you think Eleanor's response was completely justified, smash that like button and subscribe to support stories of standing up against injustice. What do you think will happen when the CEO of Global Air discovers his company just lost an $8 billion contract? And how will Amara handle being publicly humiliated while her dream of Paris seems to slip away? Stay tuned for what happens next in this unbelievable true story of courage and consequences. Within hours of Amara's removal from Flight 2187, the incident had exploded across social media platforms. It wasn't just Eleanor's recording that went viral. 6 different passengers had captured videos from various angles, all telling the same damning story. The hashtag #DonnerFlyingWhileBlack began trending nationwide, with Amara's ordeal becoming the centerpiece of a much larger conversation about discrimination in the airline industry. The most damaging clip showed Veronica clearly ignoring white passengers, using electronic devices while aggressively confronting Amara, culminating in the shocking moment when she physically struck the headphones from the teenager's hands. In the background, passengers could be heard gasping in disbelief. Global Air's initial response only fueled the growing outrage. Their tersely worded statement claimed they were investigating an incident involving a non-compliant passenger and standing by their crew members who ensure passenger safety. The statement made no mention of the physical contact or the obvious disparity in treatment. Meanwhile, Eleanor Wilson was executing a strategic plan with the precision that had made her legendary in the aerospace industry. From the airport's exclusive chairman's lounge, she made a series of calls to industry contacts, financial analysts, and civil rights organizations. By early evening, news broke that Wilson Industries had terminated an $8 billion contract for new aircraft and components with Global Air, a deal that had been years in the making and represented nearly 15% of Global Air's projected revenue for the next 5 years. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Global Air's stock plummeted 17% before trading was temporarily halted. CNBC, Bloomberg, and other financial networks scrambled to cover what analysts were calling the most expensive case of discriminatory customer service in aviation history. Global Air CEO Thomas Bradford appeared visibly shaken during an emergency press conference. "We take these allegations very seriously," he stated, sweat beading on his forehead under the harsh lights. "We've placed the flight attendant on administrative leave pending investigation. Global Air has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind." But Eleanor's contacts in the industry fed her information suggesting a very different narrative behind closed doors. Bradford had reportedly raged about overreaction and playing the race card, while company attorneys were already building a case to discredit Amara rather than address the flight attendant's behavior. For Amara, the viral fame was a double-edged sword. Supportive messages flooded in from around the world, with many sharing similar experiences of discrimination. But alongside the support came vicious racist attacks. Anonymous accounts posted altered images of her, sent death threats, and accused her of orchestrating the incident for fame or financial gain. Her social media accounts were flooded with so much hate speech that she had to temporarily deactivate them. "This isn't just about me anymore," Amara told her grandmother as they settled into their hotel suite, their Paris plans now on indefinite hold. These comments show exactly why this matters so much. So many people experienced the same treatment, but didn't have someone like you to fight for them. Eleanor nodded gravely. "That's precisely why we can't let this go. This isn't the first incident at Global Air, it's just the first one they couldn't bury." The next morning, Global Air announced they had suspended Veronica Klein without pay, calling the incident isolated and not reflective of our company values. They also reached out to Eleanor's office requesting a private meeting to resolve the situation amicably. What they didn't know was that Eleanor had already received confidential information from industry insiders. 5 previous racial discrimination complaints against Veronica had been quietly settled with non-disclosure agreements over the past 3 years. Global Air hadn't just failed to address a problematic employee, they had systematically protected her. As news vans gathered outside their hotel and interview requests poured in from major networks, Eleanor looked at her granddaughter with fierce determination. "They think this will blow over with a suspension and an apology," she said. "But they have no idea what's coming. This is just the beginning." 3 days after the incident, Global Air orchestrated what they believed would be the perfect public relations resolution. In a carefully staged meeting at their corporate headquarters, CEO Thomas Bradford sat across from Amara and Eleanor Wilson. in a glass-walled conference room deliberately visible to the press corps assembled outside. Cameras captured Bradford's practiced expression of contrition as he extended his hand toward Amara. "On behalf of Global Air, I want to personally apologize for your experience," Bradford said, his voice calibrated to hit the exact notes of remorse, without admitting liability. "What happened does not reflect our values as a company committed to equality and respect for all passengers." Beside him sat the company's chief diversity officer, Dr. Melanie Parker, a black woman whose presence was clearly meant to reinforce Global Air's supposed commitment to inclusion. She had been hired just 6 months earlier and had no real authority within the company structure, something Eleanor had discovered through her industry contacts. "We'd like to offer you lifetime first-class travel on any Global Air route," Bradford continued, sliding an elegant envelope across the table. "And we've made a donation to the National Association for Advancement of Colored People in your name." Cameras flashed outside the glass walls. This was exactly the image Global Air wanted to project, the magnanimous corporation making amends to the wronged teenager. Eleanor noticed how Bradford's eyes constantly darted to the press, ensuring they captured his performative generosity. Amara felt deeply uncomfortable. The theatricality of it all felt hollow, especially with the knowledge that Veronica had only been suspended, not terminated. But with Bradford's hand extended and dozens of cameras documenting the moment, she felt trapped in a narrative not of her making. "Thank you for acknowledging the incident," she said carefully, briefly shaking his hand but leaving the envelope untouched on the table. She had prepared her own statement, one that Eleanor had helped her craft. "I hope this situation leads to meaningful changes in how all passengers are treated, regardless of their race or appearance." Bradford's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as Amara went off script. This wasn't the grateful acceptance he had anticipated. Nevertheless, he quickly recovered, placing his hand on Amara's shoulder for the cameras, a gesture of reconciliation for the evening news. By that night, most major networks were running with the story of resolution and corporate responsibility. "Global Air makes amends to teen indiscrimination case," read the CNN Chiron. Social media began to move on to the next outrage, and Global Air's stock regained 5 percentage points in after-hours trading. What the cameras didn't capture was what happened immediately after the press was escorted from the building. Bradford's demeanor changed instantly, his smile vanishing as he checked his watch impatiently. "Well, I think we've addressed this matter thoroughly," he said coolly. "Our legal team will draw up the necessary confidentiality agreements. In exchange for the travel benefits, we'll need assurances that this incident won't be discussed further." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "We haven't agreed to any confidentiality terms, Mr. Bradford, and my granddaughter's experience isn't something to be swept under a rug with free tickets." Bradford's facade cracked slightly. "Mrs. Wilson, be reasonable. We've gone above and beyond here. The incident, while unfortunate, has been addressed. Continuing to pursue this would be unproductive for all parties." The veiled threat wasn't lost on either Wilson woman. As they left Global Air headquarters, Amara felt a creeping unease. "That wasn't really about making things right, was it?" "No, sweetheart," Eleanor replied. "That was about optics, and we just witnessed the first act of a corporate cover-up." Unknown to Amara and Eleanor, even as they drove away, separate meetings were taking place in different parts of the Global Air complex. In the executive suite, Bradford gathered his crisis management team. "The public display worked, but we need insurance," he told them, loosening his tie. "I want everything we can find on this girl. Social media, school records, anything that might suggest a pattern of seeking attention or conflicts with authority. And get me the unedited security footage from the plane. There must be angles we can use." Meanwhile, in a small human resources office on the 3rd floor, Veronica Klein sat with Global Air's Deputy General Counsel. Despite her suspension, she looked surprisingly confident. "Just lay low for a few weeks," the lawyer advised her. "We'll bring you back once this blows over, probably at a different hub. The company appreciates your discretion in this matter." "What about the videos?" Veronica asked. "They make me look terrible." "We're handling that," he assured her. "We Have experts who can provide alternative interpretations of what happened. By the time we're done, people will question whether any discrimination occurred at all. As Amara appeared on Good Morning America the following day, discussing her hopes for positive change in the airline industry, she had no idea that a team of Global Air lawyers and PR specialists was already building a case against her, one designed not just to discredit her story, but to destroy her reputation entirely. The apparent victory was about to transform into something far more sinister, and neither Amara nor Eleanor realized that Global Air was merely setting the stage for a devastating counterattack. The morning began with Amara trending on Twitter, but not for the reasons she'd experienced days earlier. Now her name was attached to hashtags like entitled passenger and a race card scam. The shift had happened with calculated precision overnight, beginning with an exclusive report on a right-wing news network featuring previously unseen footage of the incident on Flight 2187. The footage, heavily edited and stripped of context, showed only a brief segment where Amara appeared to raise her voice after Veronica had already struck her headphones. The crucial preceding moments of discrimination were conspicuously absent. The chyron beneath the video read, "Teen's airborne tantrum. The story Global Air doesn't want you to see." "They're lying," Amara whispered, staring at her phone in disbelief. As similar stories spread across multiple platforms, an anonymous airline insider claimed Amara had been argumentative from the moment she boarded, demanding special treatment and ignoring repeated safety instructions. Another report cited unnamed sources close to the situation, alleging this wasn't her first incident of playing the race card when not getting her way. Most disturbingly, doctored screenshots began circulating of fake social media posts attributed to Amara, containing inflammatory statements about white people and airlines. Though these were obvious fabrications to anyone who knew her, they spread rapidly through certain corners of the internet, creating a completely false narrative about her character. Eleanor fielded a call from her publicist. "It's a coordinated campaign," the publicist confirmed. "This has Global Air's fingerprints all over it. They've activated their crisis management playbook, discredit the victim, shift the narrative, create enough doubt to make the public lose interest in the truth." The attacks quickly became personal and increasingly vicious. Amara's school records were mysteriously leaked online, with minor disciplinary incidents from years earlier, like a 6th grade detention for talking in class, presented as evidence of behavioral problems. Conservative pundits questioned why she was playing victim while enjoying the privileges of her grandmother's wealth. The Paris fashion internship program that had accepted Amara sent a carefully worded email expressing concerns about the recent publicity and suggesting she might want to defer her participation until the following year. The real message was clear. Her dream opportunity was being revoked. The online harassment intensified to frightening levels. Death threats appeared in her email inbox. Anonymous users posted her home address and phone number online, forcing Eleanor to hire private security for their residence. Photographs of Amara were manipulated into vile, racist memes that spread like wildfire through fringe websites. Most painful of all was the reaction from people Amara had considered friends. Text messages went unanswered. Classmates who had initially expressed support now kept their distance, afraid of being associated with the controversy. A few even joined in the pile-on, giving anonymous interviews to gossip sites about Amara's attention-seeking behavior and constant drama. "I don't understand," Amara said through tears as she and Eleanor sat in their living room, security personnel visible through the windows patrolling the property. "How can they just lie like this? There are videos showing exactly what happened." "Because the truth doesn't matter to them," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite her rage. "This is about power. They think if they can destroy your credibility, the facts become irrelevant. It's a tactic as old as discrimination itself. Discredit the person pointing out injustice, so you never have to address the injustice itself." Amara's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Eleanor nodded for her to answer and record the call. A formal voice identified himself as representing Global Air's legal department. "We're reaching out as a professional courtesy," the voice stated without warmth. Global Air has filed a defamation lawsuit against you and your grandmother in the amount of $2 million for damages to our company's reputation through false claims of racial discrimination. You'll be formally served tomorrow." After the call ended, Amara looked up at her grandmother in shock. $2 million? They're suing us? After what their employee did to me? Eleanor's expression remained calm, but her eyes flashed with a determination Amara had rarely seen. "They think this will scare us into silence. They believe their corporate power makes them untouchable." She took Amara's hands in hers. "But they've forgotten something crucial about me, something I built my entire career on." "What's that?" Amara asked. "I never start fights," Eleanor said with steely resolve. "But I always finish them. Have you ever witnessed someone powerful try to silence the truth with intimidation tactics? Comment number 1 if you've seen corporations use their resources to bully individuals who speak out against them. Comment number 2 if you think Global Air's lawsuit is clearly an attempt to intimidate Amara into silence. And if you believe the truth deserves to be defended no matter how powerful the opposition, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of courage against seemingly impossible odds. How do you think Eleanor will fight back against a corporation trying to destroy her granddaughter's reputation and future? And what kinds of secrets might she uncover about Global Air's history of discrimination? Stay with us to find out what happens when a grandmother refuses to let corporate bullies win. Eleanor Wilson hadn't built a multi-billion-dollar aerospace company by backing down from challenges. The morning after Global Air filed their defamation lawsuit, she activated a network she'd cultivated over 40 years in the industry. By noon, she had assembled an elite team in the conference room of Wilson Industries headquarters. Global Air made a critical miscalculation, Eleanor told the assembled experts. They assumed we would be intimidated, or that I would prioritize saving the $8 billion in contracts over defending my granddaughter. That was their first mistake. Her team included Dominic Hayes, the nation's foremost civil rights attorney with a perfect record against corporate defendants; Jasmine Okafor, an ex-journalist turned private investigator specializing in corporate malfeasance; and Michael Chen, a digital forensics expert who had previously exposed manipulation of evidence in several high-profile cases. "We don't just respond to their lawsuit," Eleanor instructed. "We go on the offensive. I want everything on Veronica Klein, everything on their training practices, and everything on prior discrimination complaints. No stone unturned." What they uncovered in the following 72 hours exceeded even Eleanor's expectations. Jasmine Okafor discovered that Veronica Klein had been the subject of 6 previous discrimination complaints during her 7 years at Global Air. All had been settled with non-disclosure agreements and modest payouts. More disturbing still, after each complaint, Veronica had received either a promotion or transfer to more prestigious routes, essentially rewarding her behavior. Michael Chen's digital team uncovered internal emails showing Global Air executives were aware of a statistical anomaly in passenger removals, with black and brown passengers 8 times more likely to be removed from flights than white passengers for similar infractions. The company had buried these findings rather than addressing them. Most damning of all, Dominic Hayes made contact with 4 former flight attendants who had worked alongside Veronica. All confirmed she openly made racist comments during staff briefings and targeted passengers of color for scrutiny. 2 revealed they had reported her behavior to management repeatedly, only to face retaliation themselves, while Veronica remained protected by senior staff who shared her views. Eleanor moved swiftly to change the narrative. Rather than responding directly to Global Air's lawsuit, she held a press conference that blindsided the airline completely. In the elegant atrium of the Wilson Industries building, she stood flanked by Dominic Hayes and 5 former victims of discrimination on Global Air flights, including 2 who had specifically encountered Veronica Klein. "Today, we're announcing a class action lawsuit against Global Air for systematic racial discrimination in their treatment of passengers," Dominic announced to the assembled press. "We have documented evidence of a pattern dating back over a decade, affecting thousands of passengers." The former victims shared their stories one by one, their experiences eerily similar to Amara's. An accomplished neurosurgeon described being removed from a flight for attitude when he questioned why his first-class seat had been given to a white passenger. A retired military officer recounted being accused of intoxication when he had never consumed alcohol in his life. A mother broke down in tears describing how she and her children were publicly humiliated during a medical emergency. As the press conference aired live across major networks, Global Air executives scrambled to respond. During an emergency board meeting, someone failed to properly mute a microphone during a brief recess. CNBC broadcast the hot mic moment when CEO Thomas Bradford was heard saying, "These people are never satisfied, give them first class, they want the whole damn plane." The comment spread across social media within minutes, confirming in the public's mind exactly the type of corporate culture Amara had encountered. Global Air's stock plummeted another 22% by market close. Eleanor wasn't finished. She leveraged her aerospace industry connections, reaching out personally to members of Global Air's board of directors. Many sat on other boards with her or had business relationships with Wilson Industries. Without explicitly threatening further economic consequences, she made it clear that their handling of this situation would influence future business relationships across the industry. Meanwhile, Amara found her voice as an advocate. Though still reeling from the personal attacks, she began speaking to youth groups about standing up against discrimination. A video of her address to a high school leadership conference went viral, showcasing her eloquence and dignity in the face of Global Air's smear campaign. Public sentiment began shifting back in her favor, as people contrasted her composure with the airline's increasingly desperate tactics. By the end of the week, Global Air's board of directors called an emergency session without CEO Bradford present. Hours later, they issued a statement announcing they had withdrawn the defamation lawsuit against Amara and Eleanor Wilson and were committing to a comprehensive external review of their training and customer service policies. Amara allowed herself a moment of hope when she saw the news. "Does this mean it's over?" she asked her grandmother as they watched the announcement together. Eleanor's expression remained cautious. "No, sweetheart. This means we've won the first, real battle. But Thomas Bradford is fighting for his career now, and cornered executives are at their most dangerous. He's just retreating to regroup." Her caution proved prescient. That very evening, in his corner office overlooking the Global Air campus, Bradford gathered his most trusted lieutenants. "The board has tied my hands on the legal front," he fumed. "But Eleanor Wilson just cost this company billions in market value and made us a national disgrace. She thinks this is about one incident or one flight attendant. She has no idea what I'm capable of." He turned to his chief strategy officer. "Call our friends at Meridian Aviation. It's time we reminded Wilson Industries that they operate in our world, not the other way around." With Global Air's defamation lawsuit withdrawn, Eleanor moved to expand the scope of their inquiry. What had begun as a response to a single incident of discrimination had evolved into something far more comprehensive. An independent investigation into racial bias across the entire airline industry. Eleanor established the Air Travel Equality Project, funding it with $5 million from her personal foundation. She assembled a team of researchers, data scientists, and civil rights experts to examine not just Global Air but all major carriers. The project created a secure reporting portal where current and former airline employees could anonymously share experiences of discriminatory practices. The response was overwhelming. Within days, over 400 current and former airline employees submitted detailed accounts. Among them was a bombshell, Jerome Washington, a former Global Air corporate trainer who had been fired after objecting to problematic materials in the company's training programs. There was an entire section on passenger profiling in our security training, Jerome explained during a confidential meeting with Eleanor's team. They used coded language, but the message was clear. They taught us to watch certain passengers more closely based on characteristics that were thinly veiled proxies for race. Jerome provided copies of training materials that confirmed his account. One particularly damning slide titled, "Identifying Potential Disruptions," included photographs that overwhelmingly depicted passengers of color as examples of concerning behavior, while white passengers illustrated normal passenger conduct. The data analysis team made equally troubling discoveries. By compiling publicly available information on passenger removals across all major airlines, they established that black passengers were removed from flights at 8 times the rate of white passengers, even when controlling for all other factors. For Global Air specifically, that number rose to 11 times. As the investigation progressed, more Global Air employees came forward. A whistleblower from the Human Resources Department revealed internal communications showing executives were well aware of these disparities. One email from Thomas Bradford to his executive team, dated 2 years earlier, read, "The removal statistics raise some potential PR concerns, but our security protocols are effective and should remain unchanged. Just ensure these numbers stay." Internal. Eleanor arranged for these findings to be shared with key journalists at major publications. The Washington Post published a front-page exposé titled, "Flying While Black: Inside the Airline Industry's Hidden Bias." The New York Times followed with a data-driven feature showing disparities in treatment across multiple customer service metrics. Amara, finding strength in advocacy, helped organize a coalition of passengers who had experienced discrimination. They launched the hashtag, Truth in the Skies, encouraging people to share their own stories. The campaign quickly gained traction, with thousands of similar accounts emerging from across the country. The pressure intensified when Transportation Secretary Maria Rodriguez announced that her department would conduct a formal investigation into discriminatory practices in the airline industry. "The patterns revealed by recent reporting require thorough examination," she stated in a press conference. "No passenger should face discrimination when using our nation's air transportation system." Global Air's board was forced to take more substantial action. They announced the formation of an independent oversight committee to review all company policies and practices related to passenger treatment. The committee would include civil rights leaders, industry experts, and passenger advocates, with veto power over any policy changes. For a moment, it seemed like meaningful change might be possible. Eleanor cautiously welcomed these developments, but remained vigilant. "Committees and investigations are important," she told Amara, "but real change requires sustained pressure and accountability. This is just the beginning." What neither of them knew was that CEO Thomas Bradford had moved beyond mere damage control. In a secure conference room at Global Air headquarters, he met secretly with executives from Meridian Aviation, Wilson Industries' largest competitor. "Eleanor Wilson has made this personal," Bradford told them. "I'm prepared to offer Meridian exclusive preferred vendor status across our entire fleet, cutting Wilson Industries out completely. In return, I need your help making sure she regrets ever crossing me." The Meridian executives exchanged glances. The deal Bradford proposed was worth billions, but it flirted with potential antitrust violations. Nevertheless, the opportunity to cripple their major competitor was too tempting to ignore. "We're interested," Meridian's CEO replied cautiously, "but this conversation never happened, and we'll need absolute deniability for anything that follows." Bradford smiled thinly. "Of course, I'm merely suggesting that certain regulatory bodies might benefit from anonymous information about Wilson Industries' quality control procedures, and perhaps some of their international contracts deserve closer scrutiny." As Eleanor and Amara continued their public campaign for accountability, they remained unaware that Bradford had initiated a shadow war against Wilson Industries itself, one designed to strike at the very foundation of everything Eleanor had built throughout her career. The first sign of trouble came when Wilson Industries unexpectedly lost a contract renewal with Pacific Star Airlines that had been considered a formality. The official explanation cited competitive pricing from other vendors, but Eleanor's industry contacts told a different story. Pacific Star's procurement officer had received concerning information about quality control issues in Wilson's latest component designs. Within days, similar rumors began circulating throughout the aviation community. Anonymous sources questioned the structural integrity of Wilson's newest lightweight alloys. Engineering forums featured comments from newly created accounts claiming to be disgruntled Wilson employees exposing dangerous shortcuts in manufacturing processes. Eleanor immediately ordered comprehensive quality audits across all production facilities, which confirmed her suspicion. There were no issues with their products. These rumors were being manufactured and strategically planted to damage Wilson Industries' reputation. "This is corporate sabotage," Eleanor told her executive team during an emergency meeting. And the timing makes the source obvious. Thomas, Bradford is retaliating against us by attacking our business directly. Before they could formulate a response strategy, another blow landed. The Federal Aviation Administration announced a routine review of certification documentation for Wilson's newest navigation systems. While such reviews weren't uncommon, the scope and urgency of this particular investigation was unprecedented. Wilson Industries stock dropped 15% on the news. Then came the technical problems. Engineers discovered inexplicable errors in proprietary design software, errors that could have resulted in catastrophic flaws if they hadn't been caught. The cybersecurity team confirmed the system had been compromised, though the intrusion was sophisticated enough to make definitive attribution impossible. The attacks became increasingly personal. Tabloids suddenly featured stories about Amara's private life, including fabricated accounts of bad behavior at school and manipulated photographs showing her at parties she had never attended. One particularly vicious story claimed Eleanor had adopted her granddaughter for publicity rather than out of genuine love, a cruel lie that reduced Amara to tears. The family began receiving threats serious enough to warrant increased security at their home and offices. Armed guards now accompanied them to all public appearances. Eleanor was forced to install a security system that would have seemed excessive, even for a head of state. Most damaging of all was the betrayal that came from within. Malcolm Richards, Eleanor's CFO and trusted colleague of 15 years, was caught transmitting confidential financial information to an anonymous email account. When confronted, he broke down and admitted he'd been blackmailed with fabricated evidence that could have destroyed his marriage and career. "They have resources I never imagined," Malcolm confessed. "They constructed an elaborate fiction about me, complete with falsified hotel records and doctored photographs. They threatened to release it all unless I cooperated. I'm so sorry, Eleanor." The coordinated attacks had their intended effect. Within 6 weeks, Wilson Industries had lost contracts worth over $2 billion. Their stock had plummeted 43%, erasing nearly half the company's market value. Industry partners began distancing themselves, fearful of being caught in the crossfire of what had become a very public corporate war. Eleanor maintained her public composure, but privately, the strain was taking its toll. Amara found her grandmother working at 3 a.m., exhaustion evident in the deep lines on her face. "You need to rest," Amara urged. "I can't," Eleanor replied, her voice hoarse from fatigue. "Everything I've built over 40 years is under attack. Thousands of employees depend on this company. I won't let Bradford destroy them to get to me. This is all because of me," Amara said quietly, the guilt she'd been carrying finally surfacing. "If I had just kept quiet on that plane..." Eleanor's expression sharpened instantly. "Don't ever think that. Not for a second. What happened to you was wrong. Standing up against injustice is never the wrong choice, no matter the consequences. But your company can be rebuilt if necessary," Eleanor finished firmly. "Integrity cannot. Bradford doesn't understand that because he has none. That's why he'll ultimately fail." Despite her grandmother's confidence, Amara couldn't help but worry. The attacks were escalating, and it seemed Global Air was willing to destroy both their lives to win this battle. The future that had seemed so bright just weeks earlier, Paris, fashion design, college, now felt impossibly distant. That night, Eleanor received a call that confirmed her worst fears. Their second-largest banking partner was reconsidering their financing arrangements due to increased risk factors. Without that credit line, Wilson Industries would face a catastrophic cash flow crisis within 60 days. As she hung up the phone, Eleanor felt a sharp pain radiate through her left arm and chest. The room spun momentarily as she reached for her desk to steady herself. She'd experienced similar symptoms during particularly stressful board meetings, but never this intense. "Just fatigue," she murmured to herself, taking deep breaths until the pain subsided. She couldn't afford weakness now, not with everything and everyone she cared about under threat. Unknown to Eleanor, in a luxury hotel suite across town, Thomas Bradford was celebrating with executives from Meridian Aviation. Champagne flowed as they reviewed reports of Wilson Industries' cascading problems. Another month of this, and she'll be forced to sell, Bradford predicted smugly. 40 years of Eleanor Wilson lording her success over the industry, and will dismantle it in less than 3 months. What about the discrimination lawsuit? Asked Meridian's CEO cautiously. That hasn't gone away, Bradford waved dismissively. Once Wilson Industries collapses, Eleanor will have no choice but to settle everything quietly to salvage whatever she can. No one will care about one teenager's complaints when thousands of jobs are at stake. We've won this war already. But even as he spoke with such certainty, Bradford remained unaware of a crucial development. Earlier that day, an anonymous package had been delivered to Amara's private email, a package containing documents that would soon turn the entire battle on its head. Viewers, have you ever witnessed someone deliberately try to destroy another person's life work out of revenge? Comment number 1. If you think Thomas Bradford's corporate sabotage crosses all ethical lines. Comment number 2. If you believe Eleanor was right that integrity matters more than business success. And if you're inspired by her refusal to surrender her principles even when everything she built is threatened, smash that like button and subscribe to see more stories of courage against overwhelming odds. Will Eleanor's health hold up under this enormous pressure? What secrets might be in the mysterious anonymous package Amara received? And could this evidence be the key to finally exposing the truth about Global Air's corrupt leadership? Stay with us for the dramatic turning point in this incredible true story of justice and accountability. The emergency room at Phoenix Memorial Hospital buzzed with activity as doctors rushed to treat Eleanor Wilson. Amara sat alone in the waiting area, her hands still trembling from the shock of finding her grandmother collapsed on the home office floor just hours earlier. The initial diagnosis was a stress-induced cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but a serious warning sign that Eleanor's body could no longer withstand the relentless pressure. She needs complete rest, the cardiologist told Amara firmly. No work, no stress, no exceptions. The next episode could be fatal. Amara nodded numbly, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. For the first time since the incident on Flight 2187, she found herself truly alone. With Eleanor hospitalized, the carefully orchestrated attacks against Wilson Industries accelerated. Bradford and his allies, sensing vulnerability, moved in for what they hoped would be the final blow. The news broke the following morning. Wilson Industries' largest lender had called in their loans, citing material adverse change in the company's financial position. Without Eleanor's leadership, and with insufficient cash reserves to cover the sudden demand, the company's board made the only decision they could, announcing layoffs of 25% of the workforce to stay solvent. Amara watched the coverage from Eleanor's hospital room, each announcement feeling like a physical blow. Thousands of families would lose their income because of a corporate vendetta triggered by her experience on that flight. The crushing guilt was almost unbearable. Her phone buzzed with yet another media request, this one more invasive than the last. Would you care to comment on rumors that your grandmother's company is facing bankruptcy directly because of your discrimination claims against Global Air? She turned off her phone entirely, no longer able to face the barrage. When she checked, her email on the hospital's computer, the Paris Fashion Institute had made it official. Her internship offer had been permanently rescinded due to the current circumstances. Her dream, like so many other things, had become collateral damage in this corporate war. Global Air seemed to be winning on every front. Their stock had rebounded completely as investors recognized they had effectively neutralized the discrimination lawsuit by crippling Wilson Industries. Thomas Bradford appeared on CNBC, positioning himself as the victim of unfounded accusations while expressing insincere concern about Eleanor's health. While we wish Mrs. Wilson a speedy recovery, he said with practiced sympathy, Global Air has always maintained that this entire situation stemmed from a misunderstanding that was weaponized for publicity. The economic consequences were unfortunate but entirely self-inflicted. The hospital room door opened, and Dominic Hayes, the civil rights attorney, entered with a grave expression. I won't sugarcoat this, he said after ensuring Eleanor was asleep. With Eleanor incapacitated and Wilson Industries in financial freefall, Global Air's attorneys have proposed a settlement that's essentially a complete surrender. They want all claims dropped, a public retraction, and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement in exchange for withdrawing their economic attacks. Can they do that? Amara asked, her voice barely audible. Use financial terrorism to force us to cover up discrimination? Legally, it's complicated. Practically, they're doing it, Dominic replied. With Eleanor unable to lead the fight and thousands of jobs at stake, the board is pushing hard to accept these terms. Later that evening, Amara received visitors she hadn't expected. 3 of Eleanor's longest-serving executives arrived, their expressions somber. "We respect what you and Eleanor have tried to do," the operations director began gently, "but the company cannot survive another week of this. 15,000 families depend on Wilson Industries for their livelihood. We're begging you to consider accepting Global Air's terms for everyone's sake." Their appeal was heartfelt and devastating. Amara looked out the hospital window at the city lights below, feeling the full weight of the impossible choice before her. Stand firm for justice and watch her grandmother's life's work disintegrate, or surrender to corporate bullying and betray everything Eleanor had taught her about integrity. Her phone lit up with a message from her former best friend. "Maybe you should just apologize and make this all go away. People are suffering because of this." As she sat alone in the darkened hospital room, Eleanor's breathing the only sound, Amara reached her breaking point. Tears streamed down her face as she contemplated drafting the retraction Global Air demanded. Perhaps surrendering was the only responsible choice left. She opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready to compose the statement that would end this nightmare and bury the truth forever. The document would read exactly as Bradford wanted, that she had misinterpreted events, that there had been no discrimination, that she regretted the controversy her claims had caused. Just as she began typing, a notification appeared in her email inbox. The sender was anonymous, the subject line simply, "Do not surrender. Open immediately." Amara hesitated, her finger poised above the delete button, assuming it was just another hateful message. Something made her click instead. The message was brief. "Bradford and Global Air have engaged in illegal activity to destroy Wilson Industries. Evidence attached. More coming. They're scared because you're winning, not losing. Hold the line." Attached was a single audio file. Amara plugged in her headphones and pressed play. What she heard changed everything. The unmistakable voice of Thomas Bradford explicitly instructing his team to fabricate evidence against Wilson Industries and coordinating with Meridian Aviation in clear violation of antitrust laws. As the recording ended, Amara looked at her grandmother's peaceful face, remembering Eleanor's words. "Integrity cannot be rebuilt once lost." She closed the draft retraction and deleted it permanently. Whatever came next, surrender was no longer an option. The anonymous package arrived at Dominic Hayes' office the following morning by secure courier. Inside were 3 USB drives, each meticulously labeled and encrypted. A handwritten note provided the decryption keys along with specific instructions. "Review everything before acting. The entire scheme is documented. I can testify when the time comes." Dominic assembled a small team of trusted digital forensics experts to analyze the contents. What they discovered exceeded all expectations. A comprehensive archive of internal Global Air communications, documenting not just the campaign against Wilson Industries, but years of systematic discrimination and corporate malfeasance. The most damning evidence came from Global Air's own servers, emails between Thomas Bradford and Meridian Aviation executives explicitly plotting to destroy Wilson Industries through coordinated market manipulation and industrial sabotage. In one exchange, Bradford wrote, "Once we've eliminated Wilson as a competitor, we can divide their contracts between us. The discrimination lawsuit gives us perfect cover for the attack." Even more shocking were the training materials for Global Air's flight attendants. A module titled Passenger Management included specific protocols for subjecting certain passengers to enhanced scrutiny based on criteria that served as thinly veiled proxies for race. One slide explicitly stated, "First, class passengers fitting profile Type C should be consistently reminded of behavioral expectations to maintain cabin culture. An accompanying glossary defined profile type C, using demographic characteristics that clearly targeted passengers of color. Veronica Klein's personnel file revealed a disturbing pattern. Far from being disciplined for passenger complaints, she had received performance bonuses specifically for maintaining standards in premium cabins, corporate doublespeak for removing passengers who didn't fit Global Air's preferred demographic profile. Most explosive of all were recordings of executive meetings discussing what they called passenger profiling strategies. In one session, Bradford could be heard saying, "The data on removals isn't the problem. The problem is, if that data becomes public, keep the statistics buried and the procedures verbal." Amara reviewed these findings from Eleanor's hospital room, her initial shock giving way to cold determination. "Who sent this?" she asked Dominic. "They're maintaining anonymity for now," he replied. "But based on the access level of these documents, it's someone very high in Global Air's corporate structure, possibly a board member who realized how far Bradford had gone beyond legal boundaries. What do we do with all this?" "We need to move carefully," Dominic cautioned. "This evidence would be devastating in court, but Bradford will do everything possible to prevent it from getting there. We need irrefutable verification and protection for our source." Amara made a decision that would have made Eleanor proud. Rather than rushing to expose everything at once, she reached out to Catherine Chen, a respected investigative journalist known for meticulous fact-checking and source protection. Over the next 3 days, they worked together to verify the document's authenticity, using independent technical experts and corroborating sources. Catherine's initial assessment was blunt. This isn't just discrimination. It's conspiracy, fraud, antitrust violations, and possibly racketeering. Bradford hasn't just been trying to silence you. He's been running Global Air like a criminal enterprise. While this verification work continued, Eleanor began showing signs of improvement. Her color returned, and though still weak, her mind remained sharp. When Amara carefully shared what they'd discovered, Eleanor's eyes regained their strategic focus. "Bradford made a critical mistake," Eleanor observed. "He thought this was a battle between companies, but he's actually committed crimes that go far beyond corporate competition. This is now a matter for federal authorities." Acting on Eleanor's guidance, Dominic Hayes prepared detailed briefings for 3 separate federal agencies: the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Each received carefully selected evidence relevant to their jurisdiction, along with sworn affidavits from technical experts confirming the material's authenticity. The response was swift. Within 48 hours, FBI agents arrived at Global Air headquarters, with search warrants for specific servers and executives' computers. Securities regulators suspended trading in Global Air stock pending an investigation into market manipulation. Department of Justice officials announced a formal inquiry into potential antitrust violations involving Global Air and Meridian Aviation. Thomas Bradford, arriving at his office to find federal agents boxing up his hard drives, finally realized the game had fundamentally changed. This was no longer a corporate power play he could control with money and influence. As he watched, agents removing documents from his executive suite, his carefully constructed facade began crumbling. What Bradford couldn't know was that the anonymous whistleblower had finally come forward to federal investigators. Patricia Winters, Global Air's chief compliance officer, had secretly documented Bradford's illegal activities for months, increasingly disturbed by his personal vendetta against the Wilsons. When she learned of Eleanor's hospitalization, Patricia had made the decision to release the evidence rather than remain complicit. As federal investigations accelerated, Amara received an unexpected call from Congresswoman Diana Ortiz, chair of the House Transportation Committee. "Ms. Wilson, I've reviewed some of the evidence against Global Air," the Congresswoman stated firmly. "The committee is convening hearings on discrimination in the airline industry next week. We'd like you to testify about your experience and about the apparent corporate conspiracy to silence you. This is bigger than one incident now. The American people deserve to know what's happening in our skies." For the first time in weeks, Amara felt something beyond anxiety and fear, a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her experience anymore. It was about every passenger who had been profiled, every employee who had been trained to discriminate, and every whistleblower who had been silenced. When she shared the congressional invitation with Eleanor, her grandmother managed her first real smile since being hospitalized. "Sometimes," Eleanor said quietly, "justice requires extraordinary courage in ordinary moments. You showed that courage on that flight, Amara. Now it's time to show it to the world." The House Transportation Committee hearing room buzzed with anticipation. News of the federal investigations into Global Air had transformed what might have been a routine oversight hearing into a media sensation. Camera crews lined the back wall, and every seat in the public gallery was filled. Amara Wilson sat at the witness table, her grandmother watching from a wheelchair in the front row, against medical advice, but through sheer force of will. Eleanor had insisted on being present, though her physical recovery remained fragile. Congresswoman Diana Ortiz gavelled the session to order. Today's hearing will examine reports of systematic discrimination in airline passenger treatment and the alleged corporate conspiracy to cover up these practices. Our first witness is Ms. Amara Wilson. Amara approached the microphone, her prepared statement trembling slightly in her hands. The past weeks had taught her that courage wasn't about fearlessness but about moving forward despite fear. She took a deep breath and began. 3 months ago, I was violently removed from a Global Air flight for wearing headphones, something white passengers around me were doing without consequence. What followed wasn't just discrimination, but a coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation and my grandmother's company when we dared to speak up. For the next 15 minutes, Amara methodically detailed her experience, the subsequent character assassination, and the evidence they had discovered of Global Air's discriminatory practices. Her testimony was measured and precise, free from the emotional language Global Air might use to dismiss her claims. "This isn't about one flight attendant or one incident," she concluded. "The evidence shows Global Air systematically trained staff to subject passengers of color to heightened scrutiny and implemented corporate policies to silence anyone who complained. When traditional intimidation failed, they resorted to illegal methods to punish my grandmother's company for supporting me." The questioning began, with members from both parties expressing astonishment at the evidence presented. Representative James Foster held up printed copies of Global Air's training materials. These documents explicitly instruct staff to apply different standards based on passenger characteristics that are clearly proxies for race, he noted. "Ms. Wilson, in your view, how widespread was knowledge of these practices within Global Air?" "Based on the evidence we've provided to this committee, these weren't rogue actions, but company policy," Amara replied. "The training materials were distributed to all customer-facing staff, and executives regularly reviewed the resulting passenger removal statistics." The committee next heard from Patricia Winters, the Global Air whistleblower who had provided the crucial evidence. Her testimony was devastating in its clinical precision. When Ms. Wilson's incident went viral, CEO Bradford didn't investigate whether discrimination had occurred. Instead, he immediately activated what executives called the containment protocol, a predetermined set of steps for discrediting discrimination complaints and intimidating those who made them. Patricia detailed how Bradford had personally directed the campaign against both Amara and Wilson Industries, including coordinating with Global Air's competitors in violation of antitrust laws. She submitted audio recordings, emails, and internal memos documenting these actions. "The attack on Wilson Industries wasn't a standard business competition," she testified. "It was explicit retaliation designed to force the Wilsons to withdraw their discrimination claims by threatening Eleanor Wilson's life's work and thousands of jobs." As the hearing continued, 3 former Global Air flight attendants testified about the company's culture. One broke down in tears, describing how she was instructed to find reasons to remove passengers of color from premium cabins if white passengers seemed uncomfortable with their presence. The most dramatic moment came when Thomas Bradford himself was called to testify. Gone was the polished, confident CEO who had dismissed Amara's experience as a misunderstanding. In his place sat a defensive man watching his career implode in real time. "Mr. Bradford," Congresswoman Ortiz began, "evidence provided to this committee suggests you personally directed a campaign to destroy Wilson Industries after Ms. Wilson's discrimination complaints. Did you coordinate with Meridian Aviation to Target Wilson Industries' contracts and financial relationships? Bradford shifted uncomfortably. Upon advice of counsel, I must decline to answer based on my Fifth Amendment rights. Did you instruct your team to create and distribute training materials that encourage discriminatory treatment of passengers based on race? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights, Bradford repeated, his voice now barely audible. The final witness was Veronica Klein, the flight attendant whose actions had initiated the entire chain of events. Visibly nervous and repeatedly contradicting herself, Veronica eventually crumbled under persistent questioning. Yes, we were told certain types of passengers didn't fit the Global Air image in first class, she finally admitted. Mr. Bradford told us directly that maintaining the right passenger mix in premium cabins was essential to the brand. When asked why she had targeted Amara specifically, Veronica's response sent shockwaves through the hearing room. After the incident went viral, Mr. Bradford called me personally. He said if I took full responsibility, I'd lose my job but receive a generous severance. If I implicated company policy, he said I'd never work in transportation again. He told me to make Amara look like the aggressor in all my statements. The hearing concluded with Congresswoman Ortiz announcing the committee would prepare comprehensive legislation addressing discrimination in air travel, including mandatory data reporting on passenger removals, civil penalties for discriminatory practices, and enhanced whistleblower protections. As Amara helped Eleanor navigate through the media scrum outside the hearing room, a reporter shouted, "Ms. Wilson, Global Air's board just announced Thomas Bradford has been placed on administrative leave pending termination. Your response?" Amara looked at her grandmother, who nodded slightly. "This was never about one person losing their job," Amara replied. "It was about changing systems that enable discrimination. Today was an important step, but the work continues." For the first time since the incident on Flight 2187, Amara felt the weight lifting. Not because justice was complete, it was far from that, but because the truth was finally being heard. 6 months after the congressional hearings, Amara Wilson stood at the podium of the International Aviation Conference in Paris, looking out at an audience that included airline executives, regulators, and civil rights advocates from around the world. At 19, she was by far the youngest keynote speaker in the conference's history. "Transformation rarely comes from comfort," she began. "It emerges from confronting uncomfortable truths and refusing to accept injustice as inevitable." In the half year since the explosive revelations about Global Air, the aviation industry had experienced seismic changes. The Department of Transportation had implemented the Equitable Air Travel Act, requiring airlines to collect and publicly report data on passenger removals by demographic categories. Initial reports confirmed what many had long suspected. Passengers of color were removed from flights at rates far exceeding their white counterparts across nearly all major carriers. Eleanor Wilson, fully recovered and formidable as ever, had leveraged the moment to drive industry-wide reform. As chair of the newly formed Aviation Equality Coalition, she had brought together airline executives, civil rights organizations, and passenger advocacy groups to develop comprehensive anti-bias training programs that were now mandatory for all U.S.-based flight crews. Wilson Industries had not only recovered but emerged stronger. The federal investigations had resulted in Meridian Aviation facing record antitrust penalties for their role in the coordinated attack. Major contracts that had been unfairly diverted were returned to Wilson, along with substantial damages. The company's stock had rebounded to all-time highs as Eleanor's principled stand attracted investors who valued corporate integrity. Global Air had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. After Bradford's termination and criminal indictment for securities fraud and conspiracy, the board had appointed Dr. Jasmine Reynolds, a respected aviation safety expert, and the first black woman to lead a major U.S. airline. Under her leadership, Global Air implemented the industry's most rigorous anti-discrimination protocols and transparent reporting systems. Most surprisingly, the ordeal had redirected Amara's own path. While the Paris fashion internship had eventually been reoffered with profuse apologies, her experiences had awakened a different calling. She had founded the Passenger Rights Initiative, a non-profit organization helping travelers document and address discrimination while advocating for systemic reforms. What began as a single incident over a pair of headphones revealed patterns of discrimination that had persisted for decades, Amara continued in her address. The lesson isn't that one person can change an industry overnight. It's that speaking truth, even when powerful interests try to silence you, creates space for collective action and lasting change. As she spoke, Amara noticed a familiar face at the back of the conference hall, Veronica Klein. The former flight attendant looked vastly different from their encounter on Flight 2187. Gone were the artificial blonde hair and superior attitude. She stood tentatively, as if uncertain of her welcome. After the presentation, while other attendees gathered around Amara with questions and congratulations, Veronica approached hesitantly. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "But I wanted you to know I'm trying to change. After everything fell apart, I had to examine who I had become and the harm I had caused." Amara studied the woman who had set this entire journey in motion. Veronica had paid a heavy price, losing her career and becoming a public symbol of discrimination. Now she worked as a cashier at a local grocery store, a humbling fall from her former status. "What exactly are you hoping for here?" Amara asked directly. "Nothing," Veronica replied. "I just thought you deserved to hear directly that you were right. The training, the culture, all of it. It was designed to make us treat people differently. I participated willingly and hurt many passengers before you. I'm sorry." In that moment, Amara made a decision that surprised even herself. The Passenger Rights Initiative was developing education programs for transportation workers. Having someone who had been part of the problem might offer valuable perspective in creating solutions. "We're launching a new diversity initiative next month," Amara said. "If you're serious about making amends, we could use someone with insider experience of how these discriminatory systems actually function." Veronica looked stunned. "After everything I did to you, why would you offer that?" "Because this was never about punishment," Amara replied. "It was always about change. Real change includes space for people to learn and do better." Later that evening, Amara joined Eleanor for dinner at a small Parisian bistro, finally experiencing the city she had dreamed of for so long, though under circumstances she could never have imagined. "I saw you talking with Veronica," Eleanor noted. "That took considerable grace." "I learned from the best," Amara smiled. "You could have destroyed Bradford personally after what he did, but you focused on changing the system instead," Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Individual accountability matters, but systems outlast individuals. Bradford will face justice through the legal system. Our responsibility was to ensure no other passenger experiences what you did, regardless of who's working the flight." As they enjoyed their meal, Eleanor's phone chimed with breaking news. The Department of Justice had announced a comprehensive settlement with all major U.S. airlines, establishing independent oversight of training programs, significant compensation for victims of discriminatory removals, and industry-wide standards for passenger treatment. $8 billion, Amara mused, thinking back to the contract her grandmother had canceled that fateful day. That's what it cost to start this change. "Worth every penny," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Some things matter more than money or business success. Dignity, justice, the right of every person to be treated with basic respect, regardless of what they look like." Outside the restaurant window, evening lights illuminated the Parisian streets as travelers from all backgrounds moved freely through one of the world's great cities. Amara watched them, reflecting on the extraordinary journey from that traumatic flight to this moment of genuine progress. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "The changes we've helped create?" Eleanor's eyes shone with the wisdom of someone who had fought for progress her entire life. "Change is never finished, Amara. Each generation must protect and expand what the previous one achieved. But yes, we've helped bend the arc in the right direction." She raised her glass in a toast to speaking truth, no matter the cost, and to those who come after us, who will carry the work forward. As their glasses clinked, Amara felt a profound sense of purpose. What had begun as a personal injustice had transformed an industry and redirected her life toward advocating for others. The journey ahead would have new challenges, but she would face them with the same courage that had carried her through this extraordinary chapter. One headphone incident that had ultimately changed aviation forever. This powerful story reminds us that individual courage can spark systemic change when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal. Amara and Eleanor teach us that speaking truth to power, despite intimidation, character assassination, and economic warfare, is essential for creating a more just society. Their journey shows that meaningful change rarely comes without sacrifice and resistance from those benefiting from the status quo. We learn that discrimination often isn't isolated, but embedded within institutional practices and corporate cultures. The headphone incident wasn't just about one prejudiced flight attendant, but revealed an entire industry's problematic patterns that had gone unchallenged for decades. The story demonstrates the importance of evidence and strategic advocacy. Eleanor's methodical approach, gathering documentation, building coalitions, and leveraging institutional knowledge, proved more effective than emotional reactions alone. Justice required both Amara's moral courage and Eleanor's strategic wisdom. Perhaps most importantly, we see that true accountability goes beyond punishing individuals to transforming systems. While Bradford faced consequences for his actions, the focus remained on creating lasting industry-wide reforms that would protect future travelers. Finally, the story teaches us that redemption and growth are possible even for those who participate in discrimination. Veronica's journey from perpetrator to potential advocate shows that our goal should be changing behavior and creating space for learning, not merely punishment. The courage to stand firm when facing overwhelming pressure isn't just admirable, it's necessary for bending the long arc of history toward justice. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination that made you feel powerless to respond? What would you have done in Amara's position when faced with the choice between accepting injustice or risking everything to fight it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story about standing up against institutional racism resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content highlighting everyday courage against discrimination. How do you think we can apply these lessons to address bias in other industries beyond aviation? Your experiences and insights matter in this ongoing conversation about creating more equitable systems. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most significant changes begin with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable. Together, we can create a world where dignity and respect aren't determined by the color of someone's skin.